Morning, everybody. I was going to talk to you a little bit about genetics today. Uh, I thought I'd do it from the barn while I was feeding the cows and stuff real quick. I tried to do the live, wait, chicken, the live classroom thing from out here, but the Wi-Fi won't reach from the house. So this week we've had you've had the little videos, educational videos about how we get from DNA to protein. You take your DNA and you transcribe it into RNA, and then, hang on, I need two hands and I don't want to put my coffee down. Actually, there's no place to put my coffee down. Gotta let the chickens out. Come on, chickens. Get out. Enjoy yourselves. Go find some bugs. Good luck finding them today. There's frost. Scratch around for some seeds. Hey, look at you. Anyway, so we talked about how you transcribe your DNA into RNA, and you translate your RNA into protein, and you have all these base pairs, and there's times when things can go wrong, and you end up with a mutation. Or when you take your RNA and you're translating it into amino acids, something can go wrong, and you get a mutation, and you make the wrong protein. If your mutation happens at the RNA level and you just made the wrong protein, it's not that big a deal. But if it happens at the DNA level, well, then now all of a sudden it is a big deal, because the DNA is the template that controls how everything's made. Usually when we think of mutations, we think of problems. But some mutations create an advantage. Now imagine if all these cows had horns. Now back in the day, when I say back in the day, I mean like 1,000 years ago, cattle were living in the forest like deer and everything else. And they would have had horns. They needed horns to protect their babies from wolves, or protect themselves from wolves, whichever. But then over time, they get domesticated and people are raising them, and all of a sudden here's one that doesn't have horns. In the wild, that would have been what they call a deleterious effect, or a negative, because if a pack of wolves comes by, they find the one that doesn't have horns and they eat it. And so those characteristics never get passed along. But then one gets born, mutates, doesn't have horns. And the mutation is in the DNA, so it's permanent. And by this time they're domesticated, and the farmer's like, oh, you can't poke me with the horns anymore. That's really nice. And so I think I'll keep you. And when it creates an advantage like that, then through selection, you increase the number of that gene, or gene frequency. And then over 1,000 years or so, you get most of your cattle don't have horns anymore. Because not only do they poke you, but they poke each other, and that bruises the meat and stuff like that. So horns have been discriminated against, if you will, for a long time. It's a beautiful morning, isn't it? All those birds chirping. So when the mutation is in the actual DNA, and it can be a substitution, it could be a deletion or an insertion. If it's a deletion or an insertion, then it shifts the whole line that's past that mutation, and all the other codons are read differently. And usually that's just going to be something that doesn't finish out because it doesn't code for anything. Chickens. But sometimes it's a substitution. So instead of an A, it's a U, or it's a C, or whatever. And then it makes something, can make something completely different. And there's mutations all the time. In fact, a lot of people, one of the most popular theories is like the aging process. The aging process, as a person gets old and their hair turns gray and that things don't work like they used to. You'll hear old people say, oh, it just don't work like it used to. Well, their digestive system might not work like it used to. Or their respiratory system might not work like it used to. Because you're having this accumulation of mutations over time. And so nothing works like it used to. That's true. That's the aging process. Sometimes there's a bird sounded like an alarm, like a alarm clock going off. That was weird. A dude scratching his butt. See him on the post or on the fence, rubbing his butt on the fence. He's got an itch. Where was I at? So, we talked in class other mutations, like for example with sickle cell. With sickle cell, that was a mutation that gave a population an ability to survive in the face of a blood parasite, malaria. Now, if you're homozygous for sickle cell, it brings a variety of other things, obviously. When you think about skin, the original population of humans coming out of sub-Saharan Africa had high levels and certain types of melanin in the skin, which shields people from the sun, protects you from skin cancer. Well, if you don't live near the equator, you don't need quite as much shielding. In fact, if you're far from the equator, all that level of shielding prevents you from synthesizing enough vitamin D. And so there's this melanin mutation that we commonly call Caucasian. When you have this melanin mutation where people don't have that shield from the sun, and you end up with white people like me who can get skin cancer and sunburn really bad, but we synthesize a ton of vitamin D. Hear that woodpecker? That's cool. So some mutations, if they form a biological advantage, then they get passed along. If it's in a domestic animal where we do artificial selection for it, it gets passed along. Neighborhood's waking up. There's a couple houses. Like this guy, well, that's his barn. His house is over there through the trees. There's another house. You can just see the peak of the roof there. And of course, those people. There's five. There's might be 6 houses that you can see from our house. I don't know. If a mutation causes a problem, then the animal has a biological disadvantage, and it doesn't get passed along. Every now and then, you'll see online. There's a picture of like a snake with 2 heads, or a frog with 5 legs, or something like that. Freak show kind of stuff. And these things happen, especially and you see it in frog. What's up, kitty? That's Kitty, baby. She's kind of psycho. But you'll see it in things like frogs. You'll see it in things like mice, things that have a really high reproductive rate, because the higher the reproductive rate, the greater the opportunity for a mutation, because there's more transcribing and translating and reproducing happening. So the more that it happens, the greater the chance, because there's a certain percentage of time when there's going to mutate. Well, if you look at a bacteria that might replicate every 20 minutes, or a virus that's going to replicate every 20 minutes or so, or less. So that really high reproductive rate creates greater opportunities for mutations. And that's where we see something like a coronavirus, where we're dealing with COVID-19. It was the coronavirus that was discovered in 2019. So there's 18 other coronaviruses, right? Does that make sense? And so what happens is, you have a coronavirus, like there's a coronavirus that cattle can get that we have vaccinated for since the 60s. But it's not the kind that humans can get. Well, this one that we have right now, they're not exactly sure the origin. They think it was from the bats or the pangolin or something that people were eating and keeping in captivity and in a unsanitary, unhygienic kind of conditions. Cat, you just keep coming over here and rubbing on me, don't you? So when you have these animals in these poor conditions, with a lot of manure and a lot of dirt, a lot of feces and stuff around, it's a hotbed for these viruses to grow outside of the host. And next thing you know, you get a higher rate of mutation, and next thing you know, you got something that can jump species. And it's the first time our bodies have been exposed to it. So we're naive to it, so everybody's susceptible, so it's hitting like a wave all around the world. because of a mutation. And it's a mutation that helps the virus survive, obviously, because it's doing really well, because it has a new host. But understanding mutations, it's just a simple error, if you will, in how that DNA either translates or transcribes, replicates. It can be a replication error. But if that error is in the DNA is your permanent code. If it's in the DNA, then the error passes along. If it's in the RNA, then it's going to happen in that individual, but it's not going to continue on in the offspring. And that's where we see like a lot of the errors that are responsible with aging are errors that happen in the RNA. Anyway, so I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed my little talk from the yard about mutations. When you wish to, I have that Google Meet during my office hours every day from 12 to 1. There's a link up in the banner. When you go to our Google page, our Google Classroom page, you have the title of it, and then underneath the title is the code for joining it, and then underneath that is the link for joining my Google Meet every day from 12 to 1. If you go in the classwork section, the link is also there, along with my phone number. So if you need anything, you can reach out. But from 12 to 1, I'll be on. We'll talk about this. I've only had 4 people. I had 2 yesterday and 2 the day before that have chimed in. So thank you for that. Anyway, I'm going to go cook some breakfast.